about this whole construction process and things that I'm learning about it, and just talking to people that are giving me advice, and watching Jesus and his dad basically build this whole thing, right? And I'm trying to be helpful, but I'm essentially relying on them. So what I'm learning, what I've learned from watching that up to this point, a couple of things. So construction's a blue-collar industry, mechanics a blue-collar industry. I'm involved in blue-collar stuff, right? And so I like to see how that works and how people run businesses in a blue-collar way. This is my blue-collar hat. You think, what is it that makes someone a professional, right? A guy in his garage, if we're talking about mechanics, a guy in his garage can definitely replace an engine, right? So what's the difference between a guy in his garage replacing an engine and a professional mechanic doing it, right? Well, let's consider a few things. To make someone a professional, and this goes, that was really a stupid move. This goes, this applies to other blue-collar industries as well. If you're going to be a professional in an industry, what do you need? Well, you need some level of skill, right? Obviously, some people are really bad at their jobs, but they're still professionals, and some people are really, really good, and they're also professionals, right? But you need some level of skill. You need to know how to do what you're doing. If I'm getting paid to replace an engine, I need to know how to replace the engine. Two, you need the tools of the trade, right? If you're a mechanic, you probably need a lift. You need, wrenches, sockets, impacts. Whether you buy Harbor Freight or whether you buy Snap-on, you still need those tools. Beyond that, it comes down to quality, right? And what makes quality when you're talking about a mechanic? Well, let's go back to replacing an engine. If you're replacing an engine and you're a professional mechanic, the quality comes down to, right, if you put the engine in and it runs, then the job's done, right? So what is it that makes the difference? If you lose nuts and bolts and you only put half the bolts back in, it'll still run, but that's a poorly done job, right? If you have squeaks and rattles and the belt's loose and all that stuff, the job's done, but it's not done well. So that's where it comes down to quality, right? If you take it apart well and you organize your bolts and put them back together well, that's what makes a good mechanic, in my opinion. Also, your ability to know how the systems work, and if you're taking the engine out and you see that the water pump's leaking, that's a good mechanic, right? Or you notice, hey, let's replace this hose that's behind the engine that I can only get to while the engine's out, as opposed to someone who may not notice that, and then a week later the customer has a blown up hose, engine's got to come out to replace the hose, right? That makes a good mechanic, someone who's conscientious and notices things like that. Well, let's transfer that over to, let's say construction. What makes you a construction contractor, right? Well, equipment, right? You can have, depending on what you're doing, you can have an excavator, you can have, concrete finishing tools, you can have, interior, like a drywall lift, or whatever kind of tools and equipment that makes your job easier, or that are actually necessary for the job. That's one side of it, right? Having the tools and equipment are half of the job. A lot of contractors, I've noticed, rent tools out. Instead of owning everything, they'll rent it for a week for specific jobs, because there's such a variety of things you can do in that industry that maybe you don't specialize in one thing, and you don't need to buy a drywall hanging jack tool, right? But you only use it 2 or 3 times a year when you're building a house. It doesn't make sense to own it, right? When you could just rent it for a couple $100. And obviously you have to have some level of skill, right, to do that, some experience, some skill to be a contractor. And then it comes back to what we were talking about. How conscientious are you? How well do you do the job that you have to do, right? And that's where especially contractors can vary greatly. How precise are you? How, are you cutting your boards exactly? Are you making them close enough? Does it matter? And those are things that really make the difference in whatever industry, whatever blue-collar industry you're in. I feel like that's what makes the difference. How much do you care about it? How hard do you try to do a good job? And because this is basically what made me think of it. Any idiot can swing a hammer. Any idiot can put a nail into a board, right? Any idiot can glue pipes together as a plumber. Any idiot can replace an engine in his garage. But what is it that makes a professional? And then what is it that makes a good professional? Not just a professional, but a good professional. And that's kind of what I came down to, is how well you do the job that you have in front of you. Or, how what level you take it to, what level you're willing to take it to make it a good job and to have a good reputation. I feel like that's what makes a professional. Reputation goes a long way too as far as a professional, right? If you don't care about your reputation, you're going to do a crappy job, because you don't care if the customer you're working on now tells his friend and his neighbor that you did a good job to get more work. That's just not even on your radar. But if you care about your reputation, if you want to be around for 10, 20, 30 years, then you're going to care about every job you do, and you're going to do a good job. That's all.